Welcome, everyone. We'll give it a few minutes and then we'll get started. I am beyond excited to talk about two of my favorite things, CI/CD and AI together. It's amazing. Looking forward to it very much.
I think they're tightly coupled.
It turns out. Yeah, very exciting. Let's talk about the pressure that we're all living under, this sort of hurry up and 10x attitude that we get from a lot of folks around us. I'm going to talk about what is the real path to AI productivity. My name is Amy Carrillo Cotton. I work for UpLevel. I've been in engineering for approximately 15 years, and today my day-to-day is working with leaders at large organizations to try to make change using data. I will hand it to David so he can introduce himself.
Hi, I'm David de Regt. Most people call me DDR because there's always too many Davids around. I've around 25-ish years in software, from like mobile apps to system emulators to full stack SaaS platforms, jack of all trades, master of none type person, and kind of mostly been focusing on platform engineering for SaaS companies for the last 8-ish years, especially working on what are development systems and processes to allow your engineering systems to move faster.
I'm Bryan Finster. I've been a developer since before the turn of the century, and mostly supply chain development, except for the last 10 years, or I've been focusing on how do we leverage platforms to help make it easy for developers to do the right thing, hard to let developers get the wrong thing done, and enable continuous delivery as the default.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. Both DDR and Bryan have some spicy perspectives, and so we're going to get into those today. If you have questions as we go, feel free to drop them in the chat. There might be a slight lag for me picking them up, but go ahead and drop questions. We're going to start by talking about what UpLevel has seen in the data, just to set the stage around what we see, and then open it up for a bigger discussion with David and Bryan. DDR and Bryan have a lot of thoughts on this, a lot of experience day to day. The landscape changes rapidly. My hope is that you leave this session feeling inspired, feeling empowered, and perhaps curious how to bring some of these things into your organization. Let's get into it. So like I said, I work with UpLevel, and a lot of what we do is about enabling change, but that starts with identifying the right opportunities. We do this with different instrumentation. We have software to do that. A lot of our secret sauce is in then adding the qualitative data by actually talking to people. When we blend that type of data with the data we get from the ambient systems that developers use, we're able to get a great picture of what's going on. But more importantly, we're able to work with developers and leaders to enable change as a muscle, as a capability, as a skill at an organization, and then make that into a continuous flywheel. So I'm going to start by just setting the stage on CI/CD. So as a definition, I think, unfortunately, probably over the last decade, people have started to reduce CI/CD in their minds to just pipelines. But Bryan, DDR, and I all are pretty adamant about the fact that continuous delivery is actually an entire discipline. It's about a way of working. It's about how you build software, making sure you're building software in such a way that it can be released to production at any time. It can be, not necessarily is, but it can be. So the software has to be always deployable for it to count as true continuous delivery. Teams have to be empowered to stop work and make sure they focus on the deployability of stuff versus working on new features. So again, if pipelines are down, that they're empowered to stop work, new feature work, and prioritize the pipeline. That is rare, but that is the hardcore definition of continuous delivery, or at least the spectrum where we're headed towards if we're working on CI/CD. Fast automated feedback being available to anyone at any time about the deployability of said system is a key component of CI/CD and push button deployment. So that's continuous delivery, and you achieve that by a bunch of software, by having continuously integrating software, by having the pipeline. So it's really continuous delivery and continuous integration. So it should technically be CD/CI, but we all started calling it CI/CD, and here we are. This is important because as we talk about the intersection between AI and CI/CD, when DDR and Bryan and I are talking about CI/CD, we're talking about, again, the discipline of continuous delivery, not just pipelines. Okay, here's what we see in UpLevel. I'm going to show you some customer data that is sort of indicative of things we see, trends. These are just like really good case study examples. what we have started to see is that there are gains from AI. It's undeniable. I am not an AI denier. I'm not like the folks that Bryan said that are like, no, AI is just a bubble. I don't think so. It does cause velocity increases for sure. We see in this case summer velocity, issue velocity, especially for the high users, increasing a lot. And things tend to stall out. There tends to be a plateau that happens. Sometimes it even goes back down. We see, and you'll see this on some other data I'm going to show you, we see PR review times and PR complexity just rocket up. That sometimes can outweigh any gains that were made in terms of cycle times. And that word sometimes is dependent upon sort of the context, the systemic organizational context that we're talking about, and some of the things that act as brakes on the AI acceleration. In general, again, we see this PR complexity going up, going way up again. And the more you use it, it goes up at a higher rate than the people who just use it medium usage, as you can see here. And we start to see a negative trend in terms of cycle time. Like it got better and then it getting worse. And that can be due to just AI itself, but often it's actually due towards more systemic factors. We start to sort of hit the edge of where we can go from the pure AI itself and have to really think about systemic optimization in terms of our organizational, socio-technical engineering org. How can we optimize that in order to get more out of AI? It's not just more Copilot licenses. Here's what we see. We see that there's definitely an increase in PR throughput. And unfortunately, though, that is uncorrelated with the value delivered to customers. It's uncorrelated with deployment frequency in some companies, especially because of the companies that we work with tend to be really large organizations that have big platforms, big pipelines, many pipelines. And what we see is there's just not a correlation between AI, individual developer productivity, and business outcomes like deployment frequency and new value. So that's a pretty clear story that we see consistently across our customer base. In general, and this is something that DDR and Bryan and I have talked about, is that AI is an accelerant, whether good or bad. So whatever you've got going on, AI is going to help you do more of it. So if you have a really strong CI/CD foundation, you are actually well positioned to have AI success and reap those exponential gains. However, when we have organizations that have incomplete or superficial or fragile CI/CD practices and just really haven't invested deeply in the capability beyond the technology platforms, what we see is that there's just not that systemic exponential gains, right? Like everybody in leadership wants a lot, and sometimes it's just not possible. This quote from a senior engineer really drives it home, right? Leadership wanting 50, 60% increase. But there's other delays in the release process. Like there's other things other than just an individual writing their code. So this is how UpLevel sees the future in terms of the potential to maximize AI impact. We see there's sort of two foundational things that need to be invested in. CI/CD, which is what we're going to spend a bunch of time talking about. And the other one is product thinking. I use that as an umbrella term. I'm really talking about the ability of engineers to have sufficient context about what needs built to apply the tools that they have appropriately, right? Being able to understand the business context and then being able to develop appropriately. CI/CD can support that. And Bryan, I know, has written a bunch about how that should be and is core to like the original intent of CI/CD. So by doing that, by creating these investments in CI/CD and product thinking, it is our experience and our perspective that organizations who do this will be able to really rocket past those who have a superficial application of AI. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Bryan and DDR to kick us off. I'm going to just do two questions here that you can also reply to in the chat. So Bryan and DDR are going to reply. If you want to think about this and reply in the chat, go for it. So what are you seeing as the impacts of AI on engineering, just all up? Bryan, you want to start?
Yeah, I've been watching closely how people are responding or struggling with or having success with stuff on social media. I've also been using this stuff pretty heavily for ever since I decided it probably wasn't garbage and I needed to dig into it for a few years. And everything you're saying here aligns with everything I'm saying. When people are telling me that, complaining about how it just doesn't work and it's never going to do anything good, and they're always getting garbage out of the tools, it either comes down to you're really using bad tools, or when I dig into how they're working, they're using a bad workflow. And I wrote an article recently about AI being a high pass filter in signal processing. You have high pass filters that block everything that's low and let the high signal through. Well, AI is a high pass filter for your way of working. If you have a solid continuous delivery process where you have good planning and good breakdown of work and break things down small and understand that whole continuous integration process and build the guardrails around your pipeline, all those things, it massively accelerates you. It massively accelerates me. I'm coding every day. If you don't, like you said, it's going to amplify your dysfunction and you will get hurt and it will look like garbage. And there's not really a soft line there unless you deliberately migrate.
Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
things that we say, sorry, go ahead, DDR.
Yeah, just layering on top of what Bryan said. I think the other lens that I put on this is like, is AI really all that different than just onboarding a bunch of junior engineers all at the same time to your organization? So if you've got 100 developers and you suddenly want to onboard 500 junior developers to this organization all at the exact same time, like what would happen to your organization? In most cases, it would fall over. You would get throughput losses, not gains. You'd be chasing the people around. You'd be trying to train them. You'd be fixing regressions. You'd be fixing incidents and outages, just all these things, which tends to be exactly what you see when you first unleash AI on an unprepared organization. So these CI/CD processes we're talking about are things that like many organizations just don't invest in general, and they get by due to an amount of senior people floating around and like keeping these systems alive. But in most cases, if you even hired 10% of your force on top of that, your systems would fall over already, much less if you tried to double or triple or quadruple it. And so a lot of these systems everyone's trying to onboard AI and assuming there's velocity gains, and most people aren't seeing it because they never invested the time in building those underlying systems. Most companies I've worked for the last 6-8 years, my job was to kind of come in and go figure out, why are we moving slowly? And this was before AI even happened here. And it's the exact same systemic problems that you've seen for the last decades plus in these industries are now there's a huge magnifying glass that you put on it by sticking AI on your organization, and it just brings out all those bad systems. So like Bryan's saying, if you have a ton of systems in place already to have guardrails around your development process, you have a ton of documentation, your code base is well segmented, like you've put all these systems in place with like very systemic intentional developments and effort, then you're going to have a much better time building in AI to your engineering group. But the vast majority of orgs have not spent the energy to build these systems in place. And so most of the time when I see my colleagues across the industry right now, a lot of them are actually just mad that AI is being forced onto them and their organizations because they're seeing the bad side of this game now, where their development is actually dropping. They're spending all their time reviewing PRs from slop-operators around the company, trying to just build a bunch of garbage. And so of course they hate it, and then leadership hates it, and they're saying, is this all a big bubble and is this bad? But the key is, have you built those systems in place early and often enough to be able to leverage these things? The same as, was your organization humming along nicely with no real impediments before AI ever came along? So that's kind of the category of problems that I've seen come from it, and then the good sides of that from the few organizations that have put the energy in to enable that up front.
Well, and I just want to, reiterate something and make sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're not talking about systems as in applications or tools, whenever I'm talking about this, I'm even talking about how you're organized from an HR point of view. It's all the system, and you have to look at all of that to optimize for communication and supply chain.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. When I've joined companies the last 3 times, people have always been surprised when I end up quickly working my way into the HR systems. Like, what does the performance review process look like? And like, what are we like trying to reward our engineers for doing, what behaviors? Because this is all part of the system, right? Like, why people do things is because they see good outcomes from them. And sometimes that's because that's what they think they're going to get paid for. Sometimes it's because it makes their life more fun at work. You have to tackle like all these aspects of systems to make it so that you're removing impediments from them. And it's not just building software, and it's not just bringing in like tooling and literal software systems. So much of the time my work turns down to, how do we build these people systems? How do we learn how to get teams to talk to each other? How do we rebuild organizations like from the ground up to actually be organized to deliver things effectively as different groups of teams versus just like, we're going to build a hierarchy of these independent systems. Before this, Bryan was talking about how he's building some software now to go look and see what repositories or teams actually touching across an organization to see like, is our team system wrong? because that's another thing that I've just seen so many places that I've been working. It's the teams are just organized poorly to be able to even tackle software for each other. You add AI to these systems, and now all of a sudden they're generating 3 times as many PRs. All of those PRs get to cross over across multiple teams, and then your cross-team PR problem magnifies exponentially, and then everyone slows down way worse than just a linear number of problems that you had in the first place. So it's all so related.
Absolutely. So what is the potential of AI? Is it just a bubble? Where do you see AI offering the most benefits, regardless of the maturity of the organization? Like, let's say you find yourself in the position of, I'd say, a bulk of organizations where, again, things weren't humming along great. CI/CD was maybe partially implemented and mostly from a technical point and not especially from a people systems point of view. What do you do? What's the potential for AI in that setting?
So I'm a software developer, but I spend a lot of time talking to my peers in other parts of the SDLC. What are we doing? And I've seen demonstrated examples of using it to accelerate product management, to go and find out not only what the idea should be and do we have the right details in this requirement, but is this a good idea at all? It's really good at things like that. It's really good at helping me break down from feature all the way down to small testable thing with a lot less toil. Something that usually would take me and a team, hours to do, I can do in a few minutes by myself now. Of course, it's good at development if you're also good at building the guardrails around quality first before you start trying to do development. And it's good for operations. I'm doing stuff right now where I'm looking through tickets and recorded interviews with teams to go and try to find common issues, aggregate them together, and create a prioritized list of what we should go after next. And that, the hard part was the meetings. And so it's good at assembling my random thoughts into an outline of what I should actually write about. When I have a topic I really want to talk about, but it's the act of writing gets in my way of getting the thoughts flowing. And so it's whatever you're good at, it reflects you, and it helps amplify you.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It could be bad, but that's what it does.
Yeah. Like Amy said earlier, it's an accelerant at the end of the day. Like, it accelerates your race car, but if your race car is not pointed straight away down the road, you're going to accelerate directly into a wall. So is that helpful? Not particularly, though your velocity looks really good right until you hit the wall. But that's how so many of these systems need those guardrails and stuff to be effective. So like Bryan's saying, like if you put the energy in up front, AI is a huge improvement in just so many ways across the company. Like you're saying, manage your daily work, manage your blog posts, manage a bunch of these systems. It can develop full software systems. It can develop microservices. It can develop entire SaaS platforms. It can do these things very effectively when you've put the right guardrails in place. The places I've worked for the last 2 years, AI does turn into an accelerant, but so much of that is because we spent so much time up front building out platform organizations, building out systems, doing migrations to unify our systems, decoupling systems so that they can be worked on independently in kind of bite-sized chunks that AI is really good at working on. When you attack like a giant legacy monorepo with AI, it tends to not do a very good job because there's so many just ancient coupled systems in place. And so you have to do the preparatory work to make your systems more tractable. But it's the same preparatory work that you needed to make your systems tractable to humans, like we talked about earlier. So there's all these things you can do to even use AI to get there. You can have them do migrations. It's one of the big pieces we've done over the last several years. It's you've got a bunch of legacy crap lying around. How do you get this to be updated to a newer system so that your developers understand what's going on and find all the broken stuff from the past? Have the AI work on migrations for you, and then have the AI take notes on what it learned along the way, and then have it put those notes into like agent.md files as it's doing these migrations so that the future work for it is better. Have AI go through and document your code bases for you. Have it go find these things. Even if you're not doing migrations, have it go look for the warts for you. Go figure out where it's missing tests. Tell you where you have blind spots. One of the biggest things we've been doing the last about 6 months is really using agents to go through, for example, your observability. Like, I'm virtually not going to look at Datadog ever again because if there's a problem, I'm going to tell my agent, go look at Datadog and tell me what's broken related to this area. And that's going to navigate the APIs and understand huge quantities of data way faster than I can in so many cases.
And this isn't, like this is coming. This is like what I
today.
do. Yeah. So right now, when companies are trying to onboard, this is something I see in the platform space all the time. They bring in a new platform. This goes all the way back to the 60s. They bring in, resource manage or the planning software for manufacturing. And if they didn't say, okay, now how do we adapt our workflow to this platform, then they fell on their face. And that happens on every single platform adoption. This is the most impactful platform that's ever happened in my career. And I'm seeing it all over the place. I cannot stress enough. Use the platform to help you prepare to use the platform correctly before you try to use it for coding. So, like you were talking about handling legacy code, but also if you haven't done the hard work of prepping, making sure you've got guardrails and pipelines with all the quality gates installed, use it to help you do that. Use it to help refine requirements and find holes or gaps or even just contradictions in requirements. It's too vague for an AI to understand it. It's way too vague for me. And fix those problems. Ask it questions about organizational structures, reference team topologies and reference your organization and say, where are our gaps? And make some suggestions. Listen to it because it's a reference material, right? You just have to know what questions to ask. And my recommendation is use it to help improve your organization and then improve how your organization delivers with it.
I love that. It's such an opportunity to use AI, to be better at AI. One of the things that you guys have been talking about are some of the foundational pieces that need to be in place. Before I ask my next question, is there anything else in that list? Like, what are those foundational CI/CD things that you haven't already mentioned that teams need to do to take advantage of AI? And again, how would you point AI at that? Are we missing anything?
I'd go look at minimumcd.org and solve the problems on the main page. That's what I would do because solving those problems shows you what's broken. The only way I know how to solve those problems is go into a team and say, okay, now why can't we deploy today's work today and then work through the problem? It's always contextual, but those are the common problems you have to solve. Solving those problems uncovers your dysfunction. Before, I would say that CD was a spotlight that would just shine a light on dysfunction, that if you took it seriously would help you fix everything. AI is like that, except it's a supernova and it's much less forgiving.
I think that's fair. So why do you think teams don't do those things? Like, why do we think we're in this perspective, where, 10 years later, a lot of teams can't ship today's work today? Why are we here?
So we're here because of conference-driven development, where people see something about continuous delivery and think it's about speed. I get this all the time. Well, CD won't help you with this problem because we don't need to go faster to fix it. CD is about safer. It enables speed, but that's just a side effect. It's about safer, and you have to do everything around it. They don't understand what CD is because they haven't done the hard work to study it, or they haven't taken it seriously. I was lucky that we were forced to take it seriously the first time I had to go and do it. And so we couldn't compromise because we couldn't meet our business goals unless we took it seriously. And so I learned it the right way accidentally on the first time. But I have a lot of empathy with people that they think you know what it is, haven't had a chance to dig into it. They're busy, 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 and so they don't invest in it. And, it's like, well, our customers don't need change that fast anyway, unless there's a breach, guys, or unless you have an incident, guys. Your hotfix process is super dangerous, and I'm terrified for you because I have 20 years of pager carrying.
Absolutely. What do you think, DDR? What can teams do to improve CI/CD without leadership? Because Ryan's talking about like having that leadership prioritization, that leadership push, that leadership sustained investment in those CI/CD foundations. What can teams do if they don't have that leadership support?
I think it just kind of depends on what you mean by leadership support in that one. It's like, to some extent, there's always the mantra of like, be the leadership you seek in the situations. Because like at the end of the day, like if someone's holding a gun to your head and says like, write features for me for every moment you're awake and all you're allowed to do is eat, sleep, shit, and work on code, then, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot in the way of like building platforms. You're going to have to do it. But like, this is a pretty coddled industry. At the end of the day, like pretty much no one's holding a gun to your head. They're usually demanding features, but there's some amount of slack in there somewhere. And so a lot of it is figuring out how do you carve out room to work for things? Because so many times, I join organizations and I see teams and they're like, yeah, we're just under the gun to deliver these sorts of things. And it's like, okay, but if you can back up by like 2 weeks, I don't even talk about a 6-month plan. Let's back up by 2 weeks. If you want to deliver something in 2 weeks, could you spend 2 days working on some sort of system up front that helps you get things together so that at the end of 2 weeks, you can actually deliver faster? And when people really sit back and think about it, the answer is almost always yes. There's almost always some stupid systemic problems that are like, oh, the staging environment's broken, so we just test and prod. Something like that. Just with like a couple days of investment, we could just go fix some things, and like suddenly your deployment environment works a lot better, and your whole system can work a lot better. And if you can really step back even further and really think about like what's a 3 to 6 month plan, you should be able to revamp like an entire engineering organization in that time period if you can carve out some of the time for it. But a lot of that comes down to, what sort of things can you do to show these problems to your leadership to carve out a tiny bit of room and space for it, or even just, carve some of that time out yourself. The things I've always seen in organizations is, I got to deliver this thing in 2 weeks. That's my estimate. Well, okay. Can I myself go work on systems to go make it better for me for the first week so that I can then churn out code a lot faster in that second week? These things start from individuals. In most organizations, they don't have platform engineering systems. They don't have DevX engineers. They don't have people whose sole job it is to make these systems better. This change comes from within. So your engineers need to be able to figure out how do they make the space for themselves to start enacting this level of change. And then usually it turns kind of viral from there. They work on some systemic improvements. Other people around them are like, oh shit, this is actually amazing. What if we also did this? And then, you just get more and more people kind of glommed onto the cause. And you end up with just a groundswell for building the CI/CD system and really fixing your SDLC, all the different parts kind of one by one through it, because people see that, hey, if you put in an investment, suddenly everything else does get better. You're not locked into this endless treadmill of, walking on glass through your deployment system and wondering why shit blows up all the time.
Well, and there's something else that I always stress about this. One of the reasons it's not more common is because more developers haven't been exposed to it. I predicted and witnessed the following behavior. You enable continuous delivery, and this is from my very first experience. The reason I'm passionate about this to talk about it is because of the morale improvement on the team when we first did it. And my prediction was that if you don't get to work this way, you'll quit. And I saw that happen. If you have CD removed or you go somewhere where CD wasn't possible and you say, you know what, it's just not worth my pain, I quit. I'm going to go work somewhere where I can actually ship properly. And developers don't ever believe it until they see it and feel it for the first time. When they start getting over the hump of continuous integration, you start feeling a little bit and you start believing it might be possible. I spent years working with teams at Walmart doing this. And I never saw a team that was like, nah, it's garbage. They were always much better off after spending 6 weeks with my team. And companies should just be only left with terrible developers if more developers were exposed to continuous delivery.
Yeah.
People who just couldn't get another job.
Yeah, no, exactly what you're saying. So many companies don't know that there is something better. The grass could be greener. It's not always just worse elsewhere. It's like, other people have invested in these systems. But, like you're saying, if they haven't seen this before, they just think this is normal. Like living on this, walking on eggshells is just the normal case, especially when you're looking at a bunch of bigger legacy companies. Everyone I've worked with finance has a bunch of these same problems because they haven't invested in platform systems and these big old monolithic, engineering architectures. And so you bring someone in who has seen the light, and they look at the system, and then very immediately there's only two choices. They immediately start dropping all feature work to make things better because they're freaking out about how bad the systems are, or they run away screaming to another company. That's the only two choices. Once you've seen the light, you never go back to working those systems because you can't stand it. It just drives you insane.
I love that. I love that passion. I think it's clear that CI/CD is a necessary foundational piece for AI acceleration. Let's talk just really briefly about product thinking in the context and gathering context. We were talking prior. David, you want to share the story you shared about the boat hardware?
Yeah. So I spent a few years living on a boat full time, and even these days we do 6 months at a house and 6 months in a boat. So I spent a lot of my time working and living on a boat and dealing with where am I anchoring and boating systems and things. And for years I've used systems by Garmin. It's just kind of one of the easier to use simple systems, and it works fine enough-ish. But you use these things and you realize it seems like this stuff was all built by people who have never actually used them before. Built by committee is, I think, the term we used in the past there. And it was always kind of a joke. And then at some point when I was looking for jobs 2 years ago, I was like, maybe I should just go work for Garmin and see if I can get in there and help improve some of the stuff from within as a boater. And then I looked up their development teams, and their development teams were in Kansas, out very far from any major bodies of water, a few tiny lakes nearby. But you look at that and you're like, oh no, that's not joke. This was literally built by committee. This is people who come into work, their boss tells them what to do, they have no ability to relate to these problems, they don't really understand it, they do what they're theoretically told, and then they go home. And creating empathy for what your software needs to do is such a huge part of the SDLC. And I think a lot of where AI falls down on these cases is because you don't give it the appropriate context for your change. You're go add a text box here that does this thing. And the AI is I can add a text box for you, but why the hell are we doing this? And does this break other systems around you? Just as if you've given a junior developer, go build a text box. Why why am I doing this? Is this even the right answer? Like I could do what you tell me to, but is what you tell me to anything like what the actual correct answer is here? And so, when you're building onboarding systems, you need to be able to give AI empathy for your actual scenarios, just like you would a human. That's kind of the theme I keep coming back to. Like, treat these things like you would humans, and all of your systems make a lot more sense because they're just new humans without memory. Like, that's really all this is. Just treat them like that, and it all makes sense.
Well,
So
that's what unlocked it for me, was that I stopped telling it, I need a function that does this or how to do it. And I kept fighting with it. I kept telling it, this is my intent and this is how I know it's correct. And then it just exploded. And
yeah,
that's when
figure it out.
this is when the models were much worse. Now it's
Yeah.
like, man, I just hope that they don't figure out how to do the stuff I'm now doing. But the other thing is, going back to product management, I saw a video recently of a guy demoing the process he uses with agents to do product management, do product research, to like prioritize what features are missing in our thing that we might want to add, go look at the feedback from the users, aggregate that, and just very quickly come up with a well-structured plan, pretty PowerPoints, and everything else you need to do to sell the vision of where we need to go next with the product, with a lot higher confidence that we're right about it because it can aggregate the information so much better. And it
Yeah.
can go look at my competitors. What are they doing that I'm not, or what are they not doing that I should?
Yeah. No,
Absolutely.
I even go like a little bit of a different step with that, but kind of similar veins of before I do like almost any coding nowadays, I don't just tell it go build a thing. The first thing I do is I kind of communicate with it and I say, go look over our code base right now. Here's an area I'm thinking about building out. What does the current stuff do? This is my understanding. Does this actually jive with reality? If I want to change these areas, what are some concerns I should have? And like I make it very open-ended, like what are things I should worry about related to touching things in this area? And the models these days with the reasoning layers are actually very good at just going through inspecting, here's what all the current paths do, and then based off what you would like to end up doing here, here's the parts you should actually be worried about. Here's where scale might be a problem. Here's where you actually have some fragile like input data validation problems that might lead to weird path cases down the way. Like, imagine you had an assistant that you could go ask these questions to. Because like as a developer, these are the questions you're asking yourself, but like now you can go tell these things to go answer a bunch of these things for you while you go work on a bunch of the actual systems and go figure out designs and stuff yourself. It just saves you so much time when you can upfront go examine these systems using these tools. And then you can finally get around to just, okay, now I have confidence in the implementation I'm going to have this thing do because we've worked out all these questions that in the traditional SDLC, you probably would have run into hours to days down the line once you get pretty deep into it. And then finally realize, oh, I'm hitting something that like would have been great if I'd known this 4 days ago. But you can do that research up front in minutes.
And just to give you an idea what it looks like when you have a mature workflow with good guardrails baked in, I'll get requests for internal tooling changes on Teams. I'll screenshot the Teams message, drop it into Claude Code. It'll read the Teams message of what they're looking for, generate a high-level plan of what we need to go and do. We'll approve the plan together. It'll go generate feature files with test scenarios about how to validate the plan. We'll review that together, and then I'll say, engage.
Yeah.
And then I'll step back with my automated code review process where I've then embedded all the tooling for all the stuff that I would normally check anyway, that I've hardening that over time. And at the end, I get the running thing and I send it back to the person who requests it. You mean like this? And like, it might take a day, usually less.
It's amazing. And that's how we know it's not a bubble. I'm going to go to Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in. I have a question here that says, how do we prevent a two-tier system where teams with strong CI/CD pull ahead and others fall behind despite the same tools?
Yeah, I actually made this a comment on a LinkedIn post about this exact thing today. You train them. You have to. So, when we were trying to get everyone running continuous delivery at Walmart, they've all told me to go and create a team that knew how to go and do continuous delivery to learn how to work with other teams and to help them get to continuous delivery. You can't just hope they'll read a book and do it. It's an entire team workflow, not an individual thing you do, although it takes everybody on the team to do it. You need to go and find out, all right, now how are we comparing to good continuous delivery? And you need to deliberately upskill the people, or what I'm afraid is going to happen is the people that do know how are going to be very valuable. And the other people are either going to have pay decreases or become obsolete, because in some cases, there's many developers I've worked with in my past that I wouldn't need anymore. I could just automate their job away. because they only know how to do syntax and structure code okay, but they don't really know what they're building.
Yeah. At the end of the day, everyone now needs to learn how to be a manager. It's a manager of these junior folks, right? It's like everyone is now a team.
Well,
It's
I'd change that because number one, developers shy away from managers, but a lot of managers don't know anything about development either, at least in my experience. Technical lead. You're the
yeah,
technical lead on
fair
a
enough.
team, orchestrating the team, giving them information at the right context information for the thing you're building right now, making sure that they're doing things the right way, adjusting things when they don't go the right way. I mean, you have to, you have to be a technical leader and then when you have a team of people that are doing that, and then each one of those people has a team,
Yeah.
just imagine what's possible.
Yeah. And that's definitely the future. Like that's the tiers. At the end of the day, like the
Oh, that's my workflow. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like the lone developer just code monkeying stuff into VS Code is like that world is nearly dead. Like it's got some inertia. It's going to live for a little while, but like a few years from now, the lone person who's literally still hammering code to something is going to be a very, very, very small minority of people that are still around. These people need to understand how to be a TL, like you said, run these groups of AIs that are doing things in an effective fashion. And as we've been talking about this whole session, to do that effectively, you need to have the scaled systems underneath it, because otherwise you have to spend 100% of your time managing 100% of one of the AI's time on systems, because all of your underlying systems can't keep up with even one, much less four or more, or fleets of these underlying AI systems.
Yeah, and if you're a manager assigning work to people for the sprint to make sure everyone's 100% utilized, do not add AI to your flow.
Yeah.
You're so fundamentally broken in your way of working that it will kill you.
Yeah.
I think it's too late in a lot of cases for that, but I definitely hear you. So here's a question, and I'm going to sort of fill in the blanks a little bit because I actually get a similar question a lot, saying, I have to go back to my exec leadership and explain why we're not getting these exponential gains from AI. What should I tell them? Sort of like, how should I frame this? Especially because a lot of executives, they remember how much they spent on CI/CD, 5 years ago, and they remember, how painful that was. So, they're in their mind, everybody's already doing CI/CD. So like, how do you start that conversation?
Well, number one, I personally, I've been very worried about this and publishing as much information as I can about, executives, like that high pass filter blog post I wrote, and also how do you start migrating to it. But I mean, and I don't normally sell, but you use tools with data to tell you whether you're doing continuous delivery or not. I mean, it might be that you guys have one, I'm not sure, but you use real information. You don't just say, oh, we're doing CD, because I guarantee you I can spend 30 seconds with your team and find out if they are or not. But if you know how to use the data and use it to adjust the incentives so that people no longer feel successful by not doing CD, you will get CD, but you have to have enough knowledge yourself to know what to ask for and know what to look for.
Yeah. What I hear from my friends just across the industry right now, like so many of them are having this exact problem where just, they just gave everyone, Cloud Code licenses and they're like, why aren't you more productive? Right. It's like, you go to SeaWorld, you throw a bunch of MacBooks into the dolphin exhibit and you're like, why aren't you doing more? And it's like, oh, they don't really know how to use MacBooks, buddy. You're not going to get a lot of stats out here. But it's like, that's really not far off what's happening where you just throw tools at somebody and pray. Prayer is not a strategy. That's been like a common theme among TPMs for a while now. In most companies, prayer is a strategy. And yeah, it goes about as well as you'd expect. Like, leadership needs to be brought along on this journey. And that's, we talked a little about kind of like how to push back to leadership and carve out space for these systems earlier. And like at the end of the day, if leadership just blind demands more out of this, like a few of my friends are at companies where leadership is literally demanding that everyone go do X number of PRs per week. And it's like, what the hell kind of a spec is that, right? At the end of the day, like there's only so much you can do when leadership has stupid demands. But the underlying question is, leadership is spending a bunch of money on something. How do they get the ROI on it? And so much of that comes down to exactly what we've been saying this whole time through. How do you build up the systems so that you can actually support these faster paced tools? And that's building out the CI to the CD system like we've been talking about.
I really can't stress this enough. It's not just I'm using different tools or just like I'm committing code more frequently for continuous delivery. It's an entire mindset change. I've gone through it myself. I know I've seen other people's eyeballs finally light up when they got the new mindset. It's an entire mindset change. You're not bringing in AI and like it's Excel and we just need to teach people macros. You're entirely changing, if they're not already fundamentally doing continuous delivery as a workflow, you're changing their entire workflow, how they do their work from beginning to end, all the way through everything. And you can't just throw it at them and pray because they don't know how, they don't have the guidance to get there, they don't know what good looks like, and you have to help them.
Yeah, you have to bring somebody in who understands this stuff, whether that's go bring in Amy to tell you how to do your shit right, or go hire a senior developer who's done this at some other company, something like that. But yeah, you're not gonna hand people tools and just have them magically learn it. Like we've said a bunch in this webinar, like you have to see some examples of what good looks like to really understand how to now build out these systems, and that needs somebody who's been there and can go help you through that path. Because like Brian's saying, go talk to any organization who's just trying to adopt these tools, ask them like 4 targeted questions, and you'll have a really good idea of all the areas they're falling over nearly immediately, and like the systems they need to systemically invest in before they're going to be able to realize the gains on really any new tool, like whether it's AI or any sort of other sort of accelerant in your system. Like when you have systemic roadblocks, nothing's going to make you faster until you remove those roadblocks. Some things will make them more obvious where the roadblocks are, which is sometimes helpful, but you got to tackle the roadblocks. You got to do it with intention.
Absolutely. I'm going to close this out here. Before I close out, I want to talk about one thing that Bryan hit on a little bit, and that's sort of like the why behind why I do this work. I mean, I love talking with brilliant people and working in tech, but the reason why I do this work is because I've been part of teams that have gone through change like this, where teams become empowered and teams start to see the system, the socio-technical system, not just a collection of tools that they use to ship PRs. And I've seen that happen at multiple levels. I've been part of driving change. And I've just seen how much that empowers individuals, organizations, and lead to outcome. It just makes life better. And so that's really what I get to do day to day. And so if you're interested in finding out more, you can always go to uplevel.com, find me on LinkedIn. But in general, this is why I do it, because it's incredible to see the potential that can be unleashed from teams, from individuals, from organizations to bring out great outcomes. Thank you so much to DDR and Bryan. It was great to have you on this call, and I look forward to our next conversation because it's always great to jam out on these topics. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.